Greetings, people of Pinkbike. Dario here with the new Orbea Wild LT. This big dog is, as you can see, an Avinox powered e-bike, very adaptable, long travel as the name implies, and super capable. I've been riding it for the past few days here in Spain, and I'm ready to run you through some of the details. Speaking to the geometry of the Wild, I'm not going to regurgitate every number here, but just talk about a few of the key points. There is adjustment on tap, so big asterisk there. There's a high-low flip chip that allows you to adjust bottom bracket height by 8 millimeters. It also changes the head and seat angle by ½ degree. The head angle also has a press-in cup, so you can change the reach, the head tube angle with all sorts of aftermarket devices. Nothing is integrated there, but it is a pretty wide-ranging option. The most critical geo numbers, I would say, are head angle, which sits at either 63.9 in the high mode or down to about 63.3 in low. Seat tube angle is either 78 or 78.5, and reach numbers across the 4-size range move from 430 in the small up to 500 in the XL. I've been riding the extra large, and it fits me quite well. Nothing too unusual, I would say, in the geo chart. The chainstay length is the same across the board at 448 millimeters, so pretty neutral middle ground length, though it will probably be a bit long on those small sizes. I think if you swap between the 27.5 and 29-inch rear wheel, it changes by 1 millimeter, but that's not really enough to be worth noting. As I mentioned earlier, you can change the wheel size on this bike, so pretty significant handling difference between the two, but because the link itself gets swapped out when you make that change, there aren't any kinematic or geometry alterations that occur. Beyond that, getting into a little bit of the kinematics, they've kept a lot of things similar across the board, like the anti-rise, the leverage are changed, but not drastically. Like anti-rise is just more consistent, the leverage is a little bit higher. The big detail that has changed with the new Wild comes down to the anti-squat, as I'll get into in an interview a little bit later. That was maybe the primary driver behind the move to the Avinox drive unit. It was just main pivot placement and what it allowed them to do to the anti-squat curve. It's much lower on the new bike, and that yields a more consistent feeling through rough terrain. You have less pedal feedback, you have generally better suspension performance for the things you want an e-bike to do, which is like stick to the ground, plow through rough stuff, and feel very consistent. So it makes sense to me. I think the target user will hopefully benefit from that as well. And then you do get the added benefits of like all the other little details that come with the Avinox system. Up until now, I've kind of avoided talking about the e-bike stuff because, there's other things to talk about first, but I should get into that. Obviously, this is the Avinox M2S motor, but it has a little RS after it, and what that means is it's a custom tune. So first to the market with a custom tune, Orbea has worked for a long time with DJI in altering the output of this. I'm going to get into like how they did that and why it makes a really big difference on trail, but basically, the power numbers are lower than you'd expect. So Avinox can hit 1,300 watts at peak power, but they've brought the Wild down to 750 at peak power. You still have access to the full ludicrous power if you want for like a 1-minute boost, but their concept there was it's more usable power, and I would agree with that. Like the Bosch system hits a very similar level of peak power, and then the thing they're getting out of the Avinox that you wouldn't get out of other drive units is that really high torque. So you have 130 Newton meters of torque that allows you to like slow grind up really heinous climbs just as easily, but without the added challenge, I guess, of dealing with really high power numbers, which can cause you to like spin out or loop out. And it I would say, achieves like a more balanced feel. I think critical to that, though, is the sensitivity alterations they've made. So without getting too complicated, basically, like the bike should feel more natural. Like you put power through the pedals and it very quickly matches that, as opposed to like the slower curve that the stock motor has, which has a slight delay to it, I think maybe for like safety purposes, so that you're not like instantly getting full power and just looping out on everything. But because the power is a little bit lower here, it can be more reactive without any consequences. So what that achieves for you on trail is like maybe a more intuitive ride experience. I do think maybe like a novice user would have a hard time with the reactivity, but you can learn it. Like the first ride for me, I was like, whoa, this is like a really punchy bike. And then after a couple hours of riding, it felt really normal. So just another interesting detail on this thing. I'm gonna get into like all the other RS components at a later point with an interview, but suffice to say, there's a lot integrated here. Maybe more than is even worth talking about in one video. I think it is worth exploring like the full ecosystem of parts because it's impressive and diverse. But for now, that's enough on the e-bike chat. Hello, I'm here with Markel, Orbea's global mountain bike product manager, and we're here to talk about some of the updates to the Wild and why he made the decisions that he made in developing the new bike. I think the primary feature of an e-bike is the motor battery system. Obviously, you've made a pretty significant change moving to Avinox here, but my understanding is that the reasoning behind that change is more interesting than just it's the new motor, it's the one that sells. Can you talk a bit about why you moved to Avinox from the Bosch system?
Yes, so we wanted to make the overall riding quality of the bike better. So for that, we need a system or a package that allow us to work with the weight distribution, with the pivot point. So that was one of the key reasons why we decided to move to Avinox. So the Avinox package allows us to have more freedom to work on the pivot points, and that was key in order to make sure that the kinematic that we were offering on the new Wild were really similar to what we have on the Rayon, with a really low anti-squat in order to have a bike which is more planted to the ground with more grip, and at the same time the really light battery or the really compact battery allow us to make the weight distribution better, reducing the height of the shock, the link, the top tube, seat stay, and that way making also more room to move over the bike with a really low stand overhead.
Yeah, so essentially it comes down to just packaging, right? Like, I mean, obviously many other factors, but one of the most impressive things about the Avinox motors is how small they are relative to the field generally. And so you can get a more precise pivot point for the main pivot in order to get the kinematic feel that you want out of the bike.
Yeah, definitely. So if we compare the new Wild kinematic with the previous one, we dropped the kinematic or we dropped the anti-squat close to 20%, which directly impact on the pedal feedback, reducing quite a lot, making the bike much planter to the ground.
Yeah, and it's quite impressive. Like the builds come with the DT Swiss degree of freedom hub, and I tried back and forth, and honestly, like you can notice a slight difference, but the pedal feedback is so insignificant that like it feels like you're not gaining a whole lot by moving to that, which is cool. It's a fun thing to play with for certain people, I think, but you know the base kinematic setting of the bike is quite calm, which is it's worth whatever changes. I've touched on the the new motor tune and why that is a worthwhile alteration from the stock setup, but we should ask you as well because you're the one who decided on it. Like, how complex was that? You know, obviously you're the first to the market with a bespoke tune for the Avinox system. Do you think that there's more room to play with that, or are you like quite happy with where you've ended up?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a quite long project. So since we started working on this project, we wanted to have a bike with a really high reactivity. So that means that as soon as you touch the pedals, so the bikes react to you. So it's like the extension of your body. And this is really something interesting for us because we wanted to have a bike really good going down, but also really capable going up. So adding that reactivity was key, because when you are riding at low speed, when you have an obstacle, you need to get that power. To get that power instantly, being able to add that reactivity to the drive unit was something that we were looking for, and we've been working in the last year in order to add that reactivity to the firmware.
Yeah, and it's impressive. Like, having ridden the stock version of the motor compared to this, it's a noticeable difference. I mean, I think people will like grab onto the power difference, but the reactivity is maybe the more significant change, because it's what affects, like, you know, your initial ability to like get up a climb, to start on a trail, to do all these little smart little power moves that get you up weird technical climbs. So it's quite cool. Moving on from kinematic, from the motor, to just general design concept stuff, looking at the geometry of the Wild, it's not drastically different than previous. It's quite similar in many ways, it seems. Are there any key updates that you see there?
So let's say that in the last few years we evolved a lot the geometry, so there is not much room to make big changes without doing compromises in other aspects. So in order to make sure that every rider have the perfect geo setup for the kind of riding it's doing, so we add a lot of adjustability to the bike. So we have two links that allow us to have a mallet or 29-inch rear wheel. So that way we can make sure that the geometry is perfect for both wheel setup. And at the same time we add a flip chip that allow us to adjust the BB height 8 millimeters and making the headset slacker or more steeper 0.5 millimeters. And the headset that we are using, it's a press fit 56 millimeter headset. So those riders that they need still more adjustment, there are plenty of solutions in aftermarket that they can adjust the reach up to 10 millimeters or making the head angle slacker or steeper. So not big changes in the base geometry, but we decided to add a lot of adjustability to the package.
Looking at one of the only adjustments you don't have, the rear center, like chainstay length, you know, if you look at the Rayon, which had a fairly significant update last year, you offer that in two different options for the rear center. Do you feel like maybe that's something that could get added to the Wild at some point? You know, because you look at it is one size across the board from the XL that I was riding down to the small, and like where it may make perfect sense for the large, it could be quite long for the small size. Do you see there being potential there for like a customizable option?
So, I mean, it's been something that we have been discussing internally quite a lot. The reality is that we don't feel that making adjustable chainstay length based on the size makes much sense, and that is something that what we are seeing on the Rayon. So on the Rayon, based on independently on the size, you can pick the chainstay length that suits better with your riding style. So if you are a rider that really prefer a nimble bike, even using an extra large, there are many riders that they are going to the short chainstay length, and exactly the same on the small sizes. There are many riders using the small sizes that the intended use is more racing or speed oriented, and they are picking the long chainstay length. So for the Wild, the reality is that being an e-bike, it was not possible to make a chainstay length compatible with 29-inch wheel shorter than 448. Okay. So that was the minimum we can get. So making it longer, it was a compromise for most of the riders. So we try to find the best balance, and at the same time, I mean, with the options that the customers are choosing on the Rayon, we don't see any clear direction. Small sizes go into the smaller chainstay length, or the extra large sizes go into the longer one. So usually it's based on the kind of riding the user is intended to do. They are going to one or to the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had this conversation with someone else earlier this week about, you know, you've got quite a bit of data from the Rayon at this point, looking at, you know, size small, medium, large, extra large, shorter, long chainstay. It'd be interesting to see kind of a matrix of who has chosen what, and maybe if they've purchased aftermarket stays to change the experience later. It's cool because very few brands have that tuning option to see how that's shaken out in the market. You know, it's an interesting case study into the concept, but that makes sense. I mean, yeah, kind of choose a good enough number for everyone, and that should work. Yeah, and then all the other adjustability does allow you to like alter the broad handling characteristic of the bike pretty significantly. Like having tried all 4 options myself, like the mixed wheel, the full 29, the high, the low, it does make an appreciable difference to how the bike rides. So there's a lot to play with. I think the last little item to talk about, not so little an item, but the RS concept behind the Wild, introduced with the Rayon RS, kind of an interesting little halo bike that may have looked kind of unusual at the time, but it now makes a lot more sense. Like we see all of the concepts that were introduced with Rayon RS are now making their way into the Wild, and essentially what those look like are, you know, full component integration into the one battery system. It seems like a fairly complex task to integrate, but from your perspective, like where do you see that as a value add for a rider beyond just like the obvious simplicity of it, which is great?
I mean, it's something that we've been pushing quite hard in the last years, because we wanted to have the riders focus on the trail, focus on the corner, on the jump, and when you have a handlebar with so many controls, at the end it's not intuitive. So we wanted to have all the controls integrated in one single unit, which we are calling the HMI. So that way, when you are using that HMI, I mean, you can control the whole bike using your thumb. So that way, we are making a riding that is more intuitive, and at the same time, this allows us to exchange information between all the components into the bike. So we are able to make a system that is smarter using all that information.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. It's very simple. Like the cockpit looks almost the same as an analog bike, which I think is appealing. It's less overwhelming. There's less stuff to break as well, like, you know, small plastic bits that crack. Yeah, it's quite cool. I think maybe the only curiosity I have is with the Fox Neo Shock integration, like where, you know, I think the general concept behind an e-bike is you're going uphill so quickly, like you do want your shock to act as if it's a descent because you're moving at similar speeds. Do you see the Neo Shock being like a huge value add, or is that more like a niche customer that might want that sort of thing?
I think that when you start working with the Neo Shock, when we start working on the configuration, it helps also on the climbs, because it's not opening or closing, it's keeping the geometry.
Sure, yeah, keeping you high on the travel.
Higher on the back, not going so deep into the travel in some technical section climbing. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a component that it's adding value. It's not cheap, but I think that having all that integrated into the same system, making it a better bike in the overall package, not only going down, also going up, keeping the geometry higher at the back, it's adding value to some of the customers.
Yeah, and because you can integrate like information from the seat post, from the drive unit, from all of the sensors on the bike, it does have a bigger, let's say, window of opportunity than like just the Neo Shock on an analog bike.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's quite cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate all the information, and it's been great riding with you. Also, he at one point held the world record for the world's longest wheelie in 1 hour, which is pretty cool. And you also did a wheelie Everest, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I was young, I had a lot of time, so I spent doing those kind of crazy things.
Well, you've still got a good wheelie, so thank you.
Thank you, Dario. It's been a pleasure to ride with you.
Yeah, and you. There you go. So, all right, wrapping things up here with some ride impressions. We've had 3 days of excellent riding here in the Pyrenees. Enough descending to almost wear through the brake pads on my bike, and I've had a really good time. One, it's very scenic here. It's beautiful. 2, the riding is sick and very diverse. 3, this is a really good bike. I have played with every built-in modulation you can make. I run it mixed wheel, full 29, high and low. I've played the suspension settings and found like a pretty happy point for, a couple days on the bike. I'd say that the thesis here is just like a nice neutral platform. I think there are some e-bikes on the market that have like really extreme data points to them, be it geometry or suspension. I would say what Orbea has achieved here is like a nice, like do everything long travel bike. It feels really impressive on the climbs. I think primarily thanks to the kind of novel motor tune. That more reactive feel definitely suits me. It's something that like I now will probably want out of other bikes. Having not ridden a ton of Avinox options on the market, but having ridden that system a little bit, I would say that is maybe that what Orbea has done here is a preferable feel for me, at least. It hits like all of the highlight points of the Bosch system, but also has like the added benefits of what Avinox has done with their new motor. So pretty cool. From a geo perspective, I think like the reactivity and the geometry of the bike work pretty well together. I think smaller sizes will probably have like the easiest experience in terms of just like sitting on the bike, putting power down and rocketing forward. For me on the XL, there were moments where I had to like consciously weight the front, do the classic e-bike thing of like hunching over with a bit of back brake to like make sure that you're staying planted, but I'm fairly used to that and it doesn't feel like an unusual thing. So just worth noting that it's still an e-bike. There's all the funkiness that comes with that, but I think it's generally a super capable climber. Like we did some gross climbs and it was mostly like hampered by my desire to scrape up horrible things than by the bike itself. I do not know how much this thing weighs, but it's an e-bike. It feels appropriately heavy and nothing too excessive. Your camera's blinking. I don't know if there's a concern with that. At the risk of sounding boring, I think the descending performance kind of follows suit with broad impressions and with the climbing, where it's nice, it's just neutral. Having tried all the different options, for me, my preference, I have really preferred the full 29 high setup, which I think if I had been asked to guess which setup I'd like the most before riding the bike, I'd probably have chosen the polar opposite, like mixed wheel low, without seeing the geo chart. That would just be like my gut feeling for a long travel bike, but I've actually really liked the full 29 setup. The trails here are pretty rocky, and so like the rollover is nice. I also just really like the way it corners with the big wheels. I think there's like a predictability to it that I really enjoy. At speed, it feels like grip is intuitive between the two wheels. And then the high BB, ultimately for me, I think it comes down to the head angle. On the XL, I could maybe enjoy a longer chainstay to get more front wheel grip, but by steepening the head angle, I think it kind of achieves the same thing and keeps the handling a bit sharper. Nothing here has been like super steep. You don't need a super slack head angle, and I think most people fall into that camp of like handling is a better thing to target than like all out stability on the steepest trails. So don't be afraid to play with the flip chip. That's kind of my takeaway here. It's there for a reason and it's worth trying. So I'm gonna get one of these for a long-term review. Stay tuned for that. For now, just head to the homepage, read the article, tons of information there, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.